Good morning. I'm Stephanie Mandeville, Communications Director from NEA Rhode Island, and I am here once again with NEARI President Larry Pirtle and NEARI Executive Director Bob Walsh for what we are calling, it's another installment of what we're calling Ask Larry and Bob, Episode 4, A New Hope. Let's say good morning, first of all. Good morning to both of you.
Morning, Steph.
It's appropriate to call it A New Hope on May 4th, which more importantly in Rhode Island is Rhode Island Independence Day, but it's also Star Wars Day. And A New Hope is just what we need as we've turned the calendar finally to May.
Yes.
It's also the start of Teacher Appreciation Week, and talk about hope, what teachers and staff have done for students is hope through this crisis. So yes, very appropriate.
Yes, so we have a lot of varied things to cover this morning. Rhode Island Independence Day being one of them, which I lobby heavily every year to Secretary Gorbea and anyone else who will listen that this should be a recognized state holiday because we were the first to renounce King George. So that's my little nerd bit that I'll throw out there. So we have a few different style questions. Let's just start off right at the top with a question from Tina in Newport. She's asking and wondering if documentation for PLU credits for recertification can be waived.
No, that's not going to be waived. One of the things with the 2 professional development days in April and the 2 in May, make sure that your local has talked to the superintendent to make sure that any professional development you do in those 4 days counts toward those 15 PLUs you need. About 50% of teachers already have recertified for and met the August 31st deadline. We're still waiting to hear, and we're pushing for the commissioner to make a decision about the recommendation to offer an extension out into the first few months of the next school year for people who might need a new additional time. But I don't think they're going to waive PLUs.
Okay. Can one of you give us an update on Amy Mullen and the issues and things happening in Tiverton?
Sure. Since we filmed last week's episode, we went to federal court, and so far so good. The judge made it abundantly clear if Amy was not reinstated to her duties as local president, he would do so, because that was one of the violations of her First Amendment rights that occurred. And in this case, the judge I'm talking about is Jack McConnell from the federal bench in Rhode Island, because federal cases involving constitutional rights end up there. There's also a whole bunch of other causes of action, unfair labor practices that go to the labor board, and grievances and appeals of Amy's incredibly unfair termination. The most important thing about what happened last week is the school committee in Tiverton meets again tomorrow night. And this will be the first time that they're meeting with full knowledge that they are personally as well as organizationally liable for the violation of constitutional rights. So I'm always the optimist, and if this is the New Hope Month, maybe they'll come to their senses and stop this action that was initiated by Peter Sanchione, their superintendent, but was endorsed and voted on by them. They have the ability to save the taxpayers a boatload of money and restore an excellent teacher back to her classroom by taking action tomorrow night or soon thereafter. They will lose this case. We will prevail in this case, and they are wasting a lot of time and money and effort and causing a major disruption in the morale among the workforce in Tiverton.
At a time when everyone's pulling together to get through this crisis we're in and to make sure that students are reached out to and educated, he pulls a stunt. And he did it in, if they had vetted him and looked at what he had cost his previous district in Natick, Mass, for some of the same bullying and denying First Amendment rights, it's the same type of behavior. But what they need to understand is, as Bob said, we're going to win this case. All of her locals behind her, all of NEA Rhode Island's behind her, and all of the Rhode Island AFL-CIO is behind her. Amy knows that. membership knows that. And they have a chance tomorrow night to correct their mistake, because going down the road, November is up, and 3 of those members of the school committee are up for re-election.
Yeah, and for folks who might not know what we're talking about, if you missed the prior episodes, the superintendent in Tiverton and the Tiverton School Committee deprived the local union president, Amy Mullen, of her job, nothing to do with her teaching, everything to do with her advocacy, protected advocacy as a union president. We sit in union situations as equals at the table, whether it's bargaining or representing members, and First Amendment rights fully apply, as well as many other legal rights. And it is shocking to the country that this would occur at all in 2020, and it's incredibly shocking this would occur in the middle of a pandemic.
Agreed. I would encourage our members to continue to reach out to Amy to show your support. Some folks have reached out to me, and I've kind of directed them to her, and you can continue to do that. And I will put my email across the screen once we get this into post, as they say. Bob, or Larry, can you talk about layoffs and layoff deadlines, please?
Oh yeah, just a quick update. This came up. The layoff deadline by law is June 1st. Obviously, there are a lot of budgets that are not settled and won't be settled necessarily by June 1st. So districts had a couple of choices. They could lay off a lot more people than would ultimately be laid off. We cannot, as a union, grant an extension to that June 1st deadline. That comes from law. The superintendents have asked the governor to grant an extension by executive order. Her legal people are checking to see if she has that power. If she does, I expect they'd push that deadline back maybe till July 1st. If she decides she does not have that executive authority, they would probably ask the legislature to incorporate it in the budget or something else. We don't have the power to do it. We will not object on a one-time basis if they move it back a month, just to save everyone the aggravation of multiple letters going out that would ultimately be rescinded.
Okay. We have several questions about back to school safety and risk, I guess we could categorize them as. We have a question from Exeter West Greenwich asking, excuse me, if teachers are asked to return to school in the fall, but a childcare option is not available for their own children due to closures elsewhere, what options would be available to those teachers? Contracts may not currently have provisions for these circumstances, but there might be new state or federal guidelines regarding family leave. What do we do? Looking for guidance.
Well, we're heavily into that discussion already. And obviously there are so many issues and concerns about the start of school, and that's one of them. And as I mentioned last week, unfortunately, we're already handicapped because unlike a lot of countries who are reopening and doing things like alternative days or half-day schedules, we don't have universal childcare in the United States. So one of the things we know is we can't have first, second, and third graders in one community going and not in another community. We can't have a group of students at a young age going and some staying home because of the childcare issues. So that's going to put a real burden on what schools are going to look like come September, and it kind of limit some of our options going forward. But that's a major concern, is how for not only for our members, but for all parents, what's the role of childcare going to be in this, and how do we take care of that with the fact that people might not be able to afford it, or people themselves may be going to work and their children are staying home. So that's a critical issue that we're already looking at, working with the governor's office, working with RIDE on how we can solve that.
Yeah, as Larry said, we're starting to shift the thinking to what does the fall look like. We're also thinking about what the summer looks like. I think the only good news in that potential question, good news such as it is that the parameters of childcare and the parameters of reopening the schools kind of go hand in hand. In fact, you arguably could say it's easier to figure out a childcare facility with a maximum of 6 or 8 children might be easier to figure out rules for than a public high school where you've got everyone trying to enter this building at the same time. There's a lot that we're going to have to digest, and we're going to have to be very cognizant that a lot of our teachers are also parents, so the solutions are going to have to be nested together so we don't end up in the absurd situation where, and for instance, one example would be, hey, why don't we just let the teachers teach remotely, but go to their classroom and do that? That's interesting until, if everyone's doing that and your kids are at home and you're in school, and that just doesn't work is part of that model. So there's a lot, every element of this has to be considered to come up with a practical solution.
Include in that, we've received several questions about educators, ESP, school building workers who are over the age of 60 and are concerned about medical risk, coupled with districts in financial trouble. And is this a possibility where there's retirement options? We have several of those questions about retirement without penalty, any incentives, and really just a kind of a general fear of going back, being over 60. What assurances can we give those folks going back to school?
And that's from the previous question about childcare, is probably the second most common thing that we've been talking about, is how do we address not only people over 60, but also people who could, be in their 30s, 40s, or 50s, but have underlying conditions where going back to work could be problematic. So those are all things we're going to have to look at. And, it could be, one 60-year-old may not be the same as another 60-year-old. We're going to have to work that out. As for an example, maybe custodians could work after the building's closed. Teachers could teach remotely, or they could be the ones providing distance learning. But those issues all have to be addressed. And we have not yet, it's been suggested by some of our members about the retirement. We haven't got that far into the discussion yet, what that's going to look like. But obviously, between childcare and people's health and safety, those are the two major issues. And obviously the safety of students, those are the issues that we need to address, and they're complicated.
Yeah, let me be very specific because we get three specific questions on the, hey, do I get to retire if I'm over 60? That means that rumor is flying. And I know it's flying because I heard the same question from someone involved on the superintendent side of things. I don't know the answer to that, and I think you have to think long and hard if you're in that situation. I mean, there's a penalty that's attached with retiring earlier than you intended to that's independent of anything else. If I let you go with your accrued time, you're still retiring at a much lower number. As Larry said, the health and safety of our members and the students is still going to be paramount, and there could be workaround situations. And I think anyone asking the question is right to be concerned about what this fall looks like. But we might be doing a New Hope episode a year from now on May 4th. And by then, the New Hope should be significantly increased, because by then, we hope there will be an effective vaccine, and well before then, community-wide testing and an ability to identify cases. So the idea of retiring at 60 when, if you're 61, everything's back to whatever the new normal is, might be premature to have that conversation. But there are rumors out there. I've heard the same rumors a lot of you have about, oh, maybe there'll be federal money that lets me retire earlier. That's not necessarily a panacea. But if there's any real news to report on it, you can hear it here first. But it's rumors now, no news.
So just taking that a step further, we have a question from North Smithfield about possible plans being made for some of the federal money to be used to support local communities to continue to pay teachers in the upcoming school year. We've talked a lot about paying teachers through this year. And this person says, I can see districts cutting our pay to balance budgets. Thoughts?
Well, if districts can't cut pay without negotiating it to start with, so that's number one. And could federal money hopefully go into the districts to help budget problems? So, and if a large part of district's budget is salary for staff, as it should be, that we're in a people business. So some of the federal money could be used for that. But as far as cutting wages and cutting salaries, that has to be negotiated. And as of right now, we don't see, until we know the final budgets, until districts actually start losing money, that's really premature to even start discussing that.
Yeah, we 39 cities and towns are taking 39 different approaches. We are disappointed at some of them who are acting prematurely and trying to take advantage of this crisis for clear political reasons, trying to gut municipal services, including public education. That makes absolutely no sense. These are not stories should be playing out in headlines. They should be playing out at the negotiating table. We recognize this is a tough situation. We also recognize that our folks, our members, both at the local level in K-12 education, our state employees, our higher ed employees, both public and private, are all stepping up and stepping up big time. And there will be balanced answers to all of it. We hope, and I think we're in full agreement with the governor and the legislature, every bit of federal money that our federal delegation can send to Rhode Island should be used to address the issues related to this crisis, because there will be a day after and a year after and a decade after, and we need to be well prepared to navigate that. And we've seen, some proposals in some communities who say, all right, that makes sense. We, roll some contracts out for a few more years and get some certainty. And we've seen some proposals that are just not very thoughtful, shall we say, and we'll deal with them all as we always have.
Great, thanks. We have a question, a couple of questions we've gotten about folks looking to maybe plan a little bit and wondering about NEARI and NEA intentions for dues and what the picture for that looks like. Larry, you want to grab that one?
Sure. NEA dues based on a formula, and it'll be a $4 increase for next year. We are recommending, and we'll be doing it to the delegate assembly in 2 weeks. 2 weeks from this afternoon, for an $8 dues increase. So we're talking about $1 a month between NEA and NEA Rhode Island. And that just keeps us able to do everything that we're doing and continue the fight, continue to be involved, to keep all our staff, to keep our professional development programs that so many members are using now. So moving forward, that's what we're looking at, a $12 combined dues increase total, which would be $1 a month. And the $8 NEA Rhode Island dues is right in with what other states are doing. Many states have formulas, so their dues are set by the formula. We've talked about that, and probably something we should look at down the road. So in times like this, the formula solves and takes care of the issue. But that was my dog getting up from under the table. He'd had enough.
I should clarify that's full dues. We have prorated dues for our education support professionals. Generally pay half that amount, so it would be combined $6 on the year, and part-time employees pay prorated amounts as well. The good thing about dues is dues are like the income taxes. We're encouraging a tax increase on the highest paid Rhode Islanders to help us through this crisis as well. You only pay if you're getting paid. If you're not getting paid, obviously there are no dues. While we're fighting to get you jobs back and getting paid again. As Larry said, we are in line with where most of the other states are, and we're in line with where we need to be to keep full operations.
I know our executive committee was last week. Is that any other highlights from that meeting, virtual meeting?
Well, we did. We brought everyone up to date on what was going on with Amy, and certainly the executive committee was full support of her, and a lot of the local presidents were on Tiverton membership call on this past Thursday. We talked about the dues. Thursday night, the National Education Association Political Action Committee, which I'm state presidents are part of, so I got to make the motion, and the votes were unanimous to endorse Jim Langevin, David Cicilline, and Senator Jack Reed. So that's all good news, and certainly we know our congressional leadership has just been terrific on helping push through and helping working people and helping education. Jack Reed on the Senate side and Sheldon Whitehouse, and of course Jim and David on the House side. We are very lucky in Rhode Island with the both the congressional leadership and the state leadership that we've gotten through this pandemic.
Yeah, we are very fortunate indeed. The other issue that came up a little bit at the executive committee meeting, and I expect will be a topic for next week's Ask Larry and Bob, will be issues around the actual end of the school year this year. You probably know by now there's a hard date no later than June 18th, so they get the schools ready for whatever summer activities. To clarify once again, if you were scheduled to end before that, you still end before that. And we're encouraging real conversations in the districts between leadership and superintendents and the Department of Ed to figure out all the hard work that really went on and to see if it makes sense to find ways to give the kids an extra day or two off and kind of backload a little extra professional development as a way to get into the buildings, clean out your classrooms. Other districts are offering other times to do that. We are told that there will be sensible approaches to reasonable requests, and we will help navigate those local by local as they come up. We realize that our folks made an extraordinary effort. They gave up April vacation, and they did a remarkable job of going above and beyond the call of duty. And in some ways, there's no way we're ever going to be able to make up for all those efforts. There's just no way we're going to be able to make up for all the efforts that occurred across Rhode Island as a society with the folks who are going so far above and beyond. And I look at our members at the Rhode Island Department of Health. We have 280 members there. And finally, they're doing double shifts to cover all the work. And everyone's been, who wasn't on the front lines of this fight, has been repurposed to be on the front lines of the fight. And before that, they were working, 12 and 14-hour days just to respond to the public's needs. There's no way we can make that up fully to them and their families. But in times of a crisis, we're the people that step up and provide calm and consistent leadership, at least public face. We can break down privately. And I'll let Larry end with this is Mental Health Awareness Month. But we're figuring out the details, and I appreciate that. We're never going to fully make up for what our folks have done, but other than and maybe in the long-term benefit of an appreciative public for knowing how hard everyone's worked.
Yeah, and I'll talk about Mental Health Awareness Month. This is a tough time. Everyone's struggling. And for people who have mental health issues, it's even a more difficult time. So we need to understand that. And there's help out there. And I'm encourage anyone who's having difficulty to reach out, take care of yourself. Don't be afraid to ask. The worst thing you can do is not ask. If you are finding you think a student's having any problem, let the right people know. You can call KidsLink. You can go to our website for all the links are all on there for mental health services. And again, our people are going above and beyond. Bob just talked about the Department of Health. What you're doing as educators, and we Teacher Appreciation Month. But take care of yourself. On sunny days like today, get outside. The students need a break. You need a break. Everyone needs a break. So take care of yourself. And again, don't be afraid to ask. The worst thing you can do is not ask for help, because help's out there. And we're all in this together. So again, I can't thank you enough and tell you how proud we are of the job you're doing for the students of Rhode Island and for each other.
I can't think of a better way to end. So I will let people know that the links that are mentioned will be in the description of the video. Happy Teacher Appreciation Week. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. Thank you, gentlemen, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks,
Thank you all for all that you do.
Yes.